Ladies and gentlemen, fasten your seatbelts and join us on an unforgettable journey, one of hope, dreams, and resilience. Imagine this: you're in the cockpit, the wind howling, the controls shaking, and danger looming. Visualize navigating through life's greatest storms, emerging stronger, wiser, and ready to soar even higher. That's the extraordinary story of our speaker for today. 3 near-death flying incidents couldn't ground him. Instead, they shaped him into a man of unshakable resolve and unparalleled courage. From humble beginnings to building the Singapore Air Force from the ground up in 1968, he's lived a life filled with challenges, triumphs, and legacies that inspires us all. Now, close your eyes for a moment and imagine flying alongside him through those moments of turbulence, courage, and discovery. Feel the uplifts, endure the downdrafts, and witness the power of resilience that defined this man's remarkable life. So, are you ready to take to the skies? Let's give a thunderous welcome to the man who truly knows what it means to soar through turbulence, Mr. Leo Tin Boon.
Whoa! Good afternoon to you. Have you fastened your seatbelts? Check, check, check. Fasten seatbelt, please. Fasten seatbelt. Fasten seatbelt. Fasten seatbelt. We're going to fly, and you're going to be turbulent. Whoa! Have you heard of SQ321? The turbulence. Some people did not put on seatbelt. They hit their head, smash their head. Some people fell to the floor, fractured their arm. We don't want to be like those passengers, right? We want to be securely fasten the belt, whatever it is. I have saved my own life once when I crash landed. At that time, emergency, there's no time to fasten your seatbelt or even tuck your seatbelt in. It's our discipline to tighten it at the point before you even start our air engine. I crashed, and my arms and legs were thrown up in the air from the impact. Luckily, none of my arms broke, none of my bones cracked. I survived. So from that event, I learned the very importance of fasten your seatbelt. Ready? Okay, your seatbelts are on. Thank you very much. Let's share some experience and stories we have. Are you ready to go? Ready for takeoff? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Oh, full power, and we take off. Oh, up into the sky. As we soar to the sky, we will come to this stage. What is today's date? What is today's date? Answer is here, 7 December. What's so important about 7 December? There's a prize for this if you give a correct answer. 7 December, 82 years ago, a major event took place in the world that threw the world into turmoil. Years of turmoil. Can anyone guess? Can anyone guess? Okay, go ahead. Yes. Say again. War. Okay, what war? World War II. Good. Here's your prize. Wonderful. Wow, I'm very happy that someone knows history, because I learned history in school, no? I did not like history in primary school. I did not like history in secondary school. But I went to university and studied of everything, history. And in the honors year, if everything I was offered honors in history or honors in political science, I chose history. And I specialize in the area of military history and political history. Those two are the cornerstone that explains life, what happened in the past, and together we can analyze what could happen in the future. For example, the Ukraine war with Russia now. There's a history behind it. It explains why it is the state it is today. And it can only predict what will happen likely in the next 5 or 10 years. So history is very important. Please pursue history in honors year and in master's year and your PhD, all right? Give us support, lend us validity. So what happened was war. And which war was it? This was the one. That was Pearl Harbor. The Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor surprised America. America did not expect to get dragged into the war. It stayed away from the war in Europe by all means. But Japan decided to pull it in and launch a preemptive attack. Japan was declaring war on US, but the message of declaration of war arrived to Washington DC, to US, some hours after the attack, the Japanese attack at Pearl Harbor. The delay communications caused by, anyone knows why it was delayed? Language problem. The Japanese wrote their declaration of war in Japanese language, and then their embassy staff in Washington DC translated to English, and there's no internet, no Google Translate in those days. They translated bit by bit and typed it into the old typewriter in English. By the time they completed the typing, the Japanese Imperial Navy, as many military operations are, they are based on time plans. Unless someone says stop, they will continue with their planned operation based on time marks. So Imperial Japanese Navy, based on a time mark without notification to stop the attack or delay the attack, went and attacked Pearl Harbor, while US had not received the declaration of war from the Japanese ambassador yet. When the message came, it was about an hour or half an hour too late. That, to the US, stirred up and woke the giant, the president of US, say, this is a day of infamy. Japan attacked us without declaration of war. We will go to war with our full force and break Japan down. So that is how turbulence, hardship came to us in Southeast Asia. And within 2 months, from Pearl Harbor to Singapore, the Japanese army conquered and the British armed forces surrendered. At the Ford factory at Bukit Timah, if you go to visit, there's a museum there. General Percival had to surrender. And in a matter of another year, by the end of 1942, Japan had occupied the whole of the Western Pacific region. We suffered like mad, Singapore. All these Southeast Asian states suffered for 3 long years. I was fortunate my father survived the war. I was fortunate my mother survived the war so that they could make me and create me. And I came into being, thank goodness. Otherwise, I would not be here to tell the story of my experience and relate the story of war to you. And to our younger friends here, let us look ahead, know what's going on. To our middle-aged youth and to our elderly friends, let us understand what happened in the past. All right, I appreciate it very much. So in my days, when I was born in 1950, I became known as the, what, boomers? Baby boomers, yeah, I will boom from the war. And I went through 3 stages in my life. From someone who's very doubtful of my ability when I was young, when I battled rural poverty, where I was brought up in Sembawang, I had to face failure in school, in education. Then as I developed a teenager and young adult, I started to develop resilience and own belief, self-belief. And based on that, I went to the 3rd stage of life in the mid-career, and later on in life, there was a higher amount of confidence and growth, and I could grow in my career, despite the ups and downs during that time. Life is like a roller coaster, like turbulent where the uplifts and downlifts, and downdrafts. So here, I would like to invite you to join me in my journey of hope, dreams, and resilience. Are you ready to join? Who wants to join the journey? Raise your right arm. Who wants to quickly jump on the journey? Raise both arms. Okay, we will go fast. Make sure your seatbelts are fastened. We will go. Let's blast off. In my early years, my 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 years old, that was in the late 50s, my childhood days were spent in Sembawang Air Base. We're a very poor background. My parents worked as household servants to raise me and my 3 younger sisters. So we were living in rural colonial Singapore. We were caught in a poverty trap. There was always not enough money to last a whole month. So we survived from month to month. Secondly, I was very curious. Curiosity kills the cat. It killed me 2 times. I have another 7 lives left. A cat has 9 lives. So later you find out what almost killed me. I'll share with you. So I was very curious. I was curious to find out why aeroplanes heavier than air does not fall to earth. When in school, I learned from physics, the law, Newton's law on gravity. Because from my Sembawang home, I can see aeroplanes flying over. I can see the British helicopters and aeroplanes flying over at that time. And these helicopters were very common in those days when the British based their helicopters at HMS Simpang. HMS Simpang is today's Sembawang Air Base. Okay, just across Khatib MRT station. So what I did was, I'm so curious, like a cat who's curious, I set my goal to find out the answer. Why do aeroplanes made of metal so heavy do not fall to earth? And that set the path of my dream. My dream was to become a pilot. That's the best place to find out. After all, who else knows better than the pilot in the cockpit of the aircraft that it doesn't fall to ground? So I set up my venture, tried to be a pilot, and set my goal. But in those days, I put hope onto my dream, despite the challenges. My parents were housemates, that's me and my 3 younger sisters, working in the British naval family. They were deployed here every 3 months. They had a turnover, so my parents always serve a new set of employees every 3 years, not every 3 months, 3-year tour. Fortunately, in the same bungalow, because this was what we call residences provided, official residence for the British colonial officers. So in this case, I am thankful to my parents to teaching me the values in life. The importance of diligence, perseverance, resilience, despite our background. Our socio-economic background was so poor because of low pay. Together they work without rest, 7 days a week, from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m., serving the household. My father was a household cook, cooking 4 meals a day for the master. We call them master. Even children got to call the boss master, call the boss's wife Missy, call their children Missy, call their children, their girls' children Missy, call their boy children master. So it's a very formal British way of addressing. So we were very subservient in the sense. So that was the area. There were times when we had to rely on just steamed rice on the last few days of the month, usually the last 5 days, when we did not have money to buy fish or meat or vegetable. So soya sauce with rice, survival food, we lasted through. Then I went to school. My father said, in those days, not many children in the 1950s had a chance to go to school. So my father decided that to get out of the poverty trap, they must send the children to school. And I was a boy, and my 3 younger sisters, they gave priority to me to send the boy to school. And the only school available in the neighborhood was a Chinese school. So I was sent to a Chinese school, primary 1 in NC. Later on, I'll explain on that. And thirdly, and related to that, my school grade was not so good. I was an average academic student. And then my parents' support was a pillar to my success, the encouragement and their dream on relying on me to get our family out of the poverty trap. So I went to school. My father enrolled me in a Chinese school, which is totally different from the MOE schools we have today. My first school was a private Chinese school run by association, a clan association, in a shop house, the old 1-story shop house in Sembawang. And I was admitted to primary 1 and primary 2 Chinese school. There were big challenges. First of all, the language that we learned was the old Chinese, not the simplified Chinese. The words had so many strokes in each word. Secondly, we used Chinese brush, calligraphy brush. You dip in ink that we rub the ink stick with on our pen and wrote calligraphy, Chinese words using big brush for the big words. We'll call it 大楷. And then even finer brush, like painting brush, deep, small one, writing small, the words a very small size called xiao kai. So those are the type of exercise we feel. It was very frightening and very difficult to learn. And when I was at the time of primary one, towards the end of primary one, my parents felt, especially my father, that English would be the language of the future. That was in 1958 or 57, because he felt that the world was changing. The PAP government and the other parties were coming into being, local parties coming into being, and there's likelihood of us going to determine our future. So learning English was important. So he decided to find an English school for me and send me to English school. They found one with the help of our master, so-called master and our boss, in naval-based school. That was a British naval-based school, which is the predecessor of today's naval-based secondary school in Yisun. So I went for the school interview, and they assessed me to say that, oh, you learn Chinese primary 1, let's do some tests. Then the good news came and say, you don't have to admit into English primary 1, you can go to English primary 2. So I said, oh, amazed. But then the real challenge came when I entered primary 2. Two challenges I faced. One was when I was in P2, 2年级, in Chinese school, in the morning, finish at 12 o'clock. My father would bring lunch to me, meet me at a neighboring coffee shop. I took lunch. He would pass me a bag of English school books and took away my bag of Chinese school books. And then pedal me in his bicycle, sent me to the nearby, quite a distance away, probably 10 minutes bicycle ride, to the English school. So in the morning I was studying in Chinese school, afternoon I was studying in English school. What was your double pressure? Over and above that, it's not primary 1, I was sent to primary 2, totally new. I was very worried whether I could succeed. With this pressure in Chinese already, additional pressure in the English language, plus the whole lot of classmates already done primary 1 English. And I was not a good student too. They put me to C class. In those days, the school children were classified on the academic ability by classes. The top lot in the standard, the year, were put into A class. The second better ones were in B class. C class were the average. D class were the poor. E class are the destined failures. So those were the days I was thrown in the middle class. That doesn't matter. It was an opportunity for me. I knew I had a chance to learn English. So there I was, struggling with English. And I was doubtful whether I could succeed. But I said, no, must press on. So that was a time when OWL came, and eventually I cleared primary 6 PSLE, and then went to secondary school at the one adjacent naval-based secondary school. In those days, 1950s, 1960s, we were in the region of a turbulent, troublesome area. Southeast Asia was in a stage of war. The Vietnam War was raging. It started from the late 1950s, raged on through the 1960s very fiercely until it was eventually ended in 1975. Many of you have read about that. Secondly, Singapore had just joined the Federation of Malaysia as a state in 1963. But that formation was opposed by Indonesia. President Sukarno opposed it, and they pursue a policy of confrontation against the new nation of Malaysia. And there was an armed conflict, political conflict, economic conflict, plus armed conflict, including infiltration of Indonesian soldiers into Johor, Kota Tinggi, where we had a company or a platoon of Singapore soldiers patrolling, and our soldiers were massacred. I think there are about 50, 60 of Singapore soldiers were massacred at the Kota Tinggi waterfall area and by in an ambush. Overall, above that, there were 2 Indonesian Marines sent to Singapore dressed as civilians, and they planted bombs at McDonald House at Orchard Road that killed, I think, if I remember, 2 Singaporeans in the 1963-64 or so. So we were facing conflict from the south. We were facing the threat of communism marching through the peninsula to Singapore in the so-called Cold War domino theory. Does anyone know what the domino theory is? In 1 sentence or 2 sentences? Raise your hand. If you can answer it, we got a prize here. History. Maybe not so much history, political science. But never mind, you will flourish, you will do well in future. You have the hope, you have the potential. The domino theory says that countries like a row of dominoes line up close to each other. When one country falls, one domino falls, it will hit the neighboring domino, who will hit the next domino, who will hit the next one. Similarly, a country that falls to communism will hit the neighboring country, and which will fall to communism. And in turn, if you look at the map, sequentially from here to Thailand to Malaysia to Singapore, the threat of communism coming to Singapore. So those were the turbulent 1960s, from the south and from the north. And worse to come, unexpectedly, and we did not want it, Singapore was thrown out of the Federation of Malaysia in 1965. Overnight, in a matter of 2 days, while Singapore was trying to convince the Malaysian government not to throw Singapore out of the Federation of Malaysia, Tunku Abdul Rahman had to decide to let Singapore out to maintain peace and order in the Federation of Malaysia. So Singapore was thrown into the doldrum, and we became an independent nation in August 1965, when I was 15 years old. When I was 15, 16, 17 years old, I was studying in a polytechnic. I was still pursuing my dream of flying, to be a pilot. At that time, the only airline available, there were no budget airlines those days. The only airline available was MSA, Malaysia Singapore Airline, because Singapore was part of Malaysia, we joined hands and called it Malaysian Singapore Airline, flying 737s, Boeing 737. So I applied for pilot's position in MSA. I went through, I was shortlisted, went through the selection, went through the first interview, went through the second interview. I said, wow, I'm coming closer to my dream to be a pilot. I can be up there. Then after the third interview, a letter came. He said, dear Mr. Leo, I wish to inform you that your application to be a pilot with MSA is, can someone fill in the next word? Denied. You say denied. Any more? Any other ideas? Rejected. Okay, any other more? Okay, all close to the same meaning. Unsuccessful. So my dream was smashed. From low to high to low, like a roller coaster. Turbulent, very turbulent journey, very turbulent mental journey. But I told myself, that is not all. MSA is not the only airline in the world. There are other airlines. What about other opportunities? Anything that fly, I'll give it a try. So came the saving grace, rejected by MSA. The saving grace was here, the British Air Force, the Royal Air Force. Royal Air Force was in Singapore, based in Teng Ah, fighters in Teng Ah, transport in Changi Air Base, Changi Air Station, providing air cover and air defense of Singapore and Malaysia at that time. In 1968, the British government announced that it would cut back its defense budget. And one of the major impact was that Britain would withdraw all its armed forces east of the Suez Canal by 1975. Initial date was 1975. That frightened us because the Singapore economy relied very much on the British spending. 25% of Singapore's GDP in those days came from the British armed forces existence and operation in here. Secondly, 1968 to 1975, how many years is that? My mental sum is not good. I got to count on the young generation of leaders. Very good in mathematics. 1975 minus 1968. How many, what is the number? 7 years or something like that? 7 years or something like that, yeah. So in 7 years, we got a shock. The Singapore government got a shock. We had to build up our own national defense in 7 years. So we started national service already in 1965-66 after separation from Malaysia. The army was being set up. The navy, we started some plan, but there was no plan for the air force, to build an air force. So Singapore appealed with the British government, please slow down originally it was supposed to be early 1971, the British withdrawal. So Singapore appealed to wait, to slow down. So eventually the government of Britain agreed to delay their withdrawal by about nearly a year. delayed to end of 1971 to November 1971. So 1968 to 1971, we only had 3 years to build up an air force, which is a very tough, challenging decision to make, to achieve, a task to achieve. So what happened was, that's my golden opportunity. No, in a face of adversity, there are opportunities. So Singapore formed the Air Defence Command, Singapore Air Defence Command, under the wings of the Singapore Armed Forces, and started recruiting pilots. There were no pilots, there were no aeroplanes, there were no missiles under Singapore's charge. What was fortunate was we had a few Singaporeans who were technicians serving in the British Air Force. They were the first lot who resigned from British Air Force and came back and joined the Singapore Air Defence Command. So that they are the pioneers of the technical group of people. But pilots, none. So ambitious recruitment policy was launched, advertisement was launched for pilots. Thousands of applicants applied for the job. I, of course, jumped on it the moment I saw it. You know, I was pursuing my dream. And we reported to CMPB, Central Manpower Base, in those days was in Kallang, the old Kallang Airport. And to my shock, when I asked, what are you here for? What are you here for? What are you here for? Pilot, pilot, pilot. Wow, everybody wants to be pilot. So the challenge and the competition was very steep. So many, I don't know how many, from what I heard was about 1,000 or so applicants. But eventually, after 4 days, I remember, almost a whole week of physical examination, medical examination, check whether our arms are long enough, our legs are out long enough, our heads tall enough, our minds are okay, the coordination of hand, feet, and mind, all those things, plus interview, plus what I call mental calculation and so on. Eventually, after about a month of selection, we end up with 32 young men vying to be pilots in the young Singapore Air Force, out of thousands who applied. This is a picture of the first 32. I'm down there, slim. Take note, slim, there's something special about slim. All of us are very slim, you see. We are not because we are staffed by the armed forces. They feed us reasonably well, but not as good as today. I remember the first meal we had, I went to camp, BMT, a big chunk of meat, a lot of rice, a lot of vegetable. When I bit on the chunk of meat, it was a big chunk of bone, like tulang, a little bit of meat on top, with a lot of sauce that camouflaged it to look like meat. So we had quite a tough time, but we have enough carbohydrates. These 32 were trained, and this picture was taken 2 months after we finished BMT. How many of you have gone through BMT? Honestly, I know many of you. Raise your hand. Those gone through BMT? Raise your hand. Okay. You have gone through BMT, you know what the challenges are. I faced even a greater challenge in BMT, as I tell you later. But nonetheless, before we go to the next slide, the story, here are the row of people who hated us. We were fortunate and we are very thankful for the British for helping us set up the Air Force. They loaned us 3 very experienced instructors, Major Ogden, Major Foster, Major Cox. Very experienced instructors to help us train the first batch of pilots locally in Singapore. So, from this 32, taken 2 months after BMT, for me, BMT was hell. I was obese. I could not run. I was always the last man in the run, in the morning 5BX run. And this was what I faced. The 2 biggest things in the obstacle course were the 5-foot wall, 6-foot wall, and the 15-foot rope. I was so fat, I literally smashed a wall every time I ran to a wall without even reaching the top. And my instructor was yelling at the back. You know, he said, "You can be a pilot, but prove yourself to be a soldier first." So that was one. The second one, I couldn't climb the rope. Eventually, I found there was a technique. There was a technique how to scale the wall. There's a technique to grab the rope with your feet and move up. And we cleared that eventually. So I became very slim, as is shown in the picture before. Having cleared that, we were all sent to what is called the air grading phase of training. And this was the first time I touched a rear aircraft here, with Major Foster as my instructor. Out of 32, because there are only 2 or 3 instructors, they couldn't train all the 32 at one time. They trained batches of 4 to 6, each instructor taking 2 students to clear the air grading flight, which is about 15 hours of flight on a basic propeller aircraft. So this aircraft does not belong to the Air Force. Remember, Air Force had no aircraft at that time. So Singapore quickly loaned or rented these 2 Cessna 172 from the Flying Club, Singapore Flying Club. Yeah, for the first almost 8 months before our order for the same model, Cessna 172 came to Singapore, which was painted in all white. The first one that came was painted white and blue with the Singapore marking around the subsequent ones were painted completely white with the Singapore marking around there. So we flew in this rented aircraft, air graded, and by batches as we cleared to go to the next phase of training, we were sent in batches of 3, 4, or 5 overseas to the UK or to the US, depending on the vacancies those countries' flying schools had for us. So filling them as demands. Those trainees who were qualified to fly were lining up in queue. So when my turn came, the vacancies existed in helicopters. So I was sent to France. But that opportunity, a golden, happy opportunity, was quite challenging. Because, first of all, my batch of 4 were only given 1 week notice to say that in 1 week's time, you pack our bag and go to France. There are vacancies for helicopter pilot training. Okay, so we say, okay, one week again, we can still pack, as a soldier, we can move. The second thing they told us, which really frightened us, your course will be taught totally in the French language. French language? We are native speakers of English. We can speak Mandarin. None of us can speak English and French. And French is hardly used here, other than the French embassy. So we took up the challenge. We could not reject. We couldn't reject. We took up a challenge, went over there, and took up a language course in France itself. In November, in the mid of the cold winter, we were put into a language school in Vichy, central France, in snow-covered area, so cold below freezing. That was also another challenge to us, where we are tropical animals suddenly dumped into the snow, so cold. Secondly, we were in a place where all the locals could not speak English. Even the instructor refused to speak English. So we had to learn French, but as parrots, using those open reel tapes, repeating. And what normally takes about 5 months was crammed into 2 months for us, because the flying school course were going to start in 2 months after we landed there. We had to be slot in. So in the school, how many of you speak French here? Parlez-vous français? Anyone? Parlez-vous français? No? Okay. One thing is that the French language is very beautiful and romantic. I love it. So long as I could understand it. The word lap in French typically means a tree or tree trunk. Okay, that's an interesting story. So when we completed 2 months of French language and we were sent to the French Army Aviation School to learn, in flying training, you normally have 2 phases or 3 phases. The first phase is theory, we call it ground school, which varies from 2 weeks to 1 month. Just purely in class, learn about theories, learn about meteorology, learn about air law, learn about radio, transmission, communication, learn about aircraft technology, aviation, aerodynamics, and so on. And lastly, one last module is learn about the aircraft that you're going to fly, the technical aspect of the aircraft, like learning the manual, operator's manual. So we were given books. In those days, there was no Google Translate. The books were all in French. And there were no illustrations, no pictures, no photos. Everything was in words. And I look at that, we were wondering, how are we going to pass the exam? We learned basic spoken language in a language school, not written English, not reading English, not reading the language, but now we've got to read the language, understand, and interact at examination and test. So I went to the local bookshop and bought a translation, French to English dictionary. Worked hard overtime at night, burned the midnight oil. Word by word, I translated the text into English. And there are a few words that came up, and one was this word, lap. That kept appearing in the technical book. I was wondering what has the tree got to do in aircraft? Up. So when I eventually learned, when I found and asked the instructor, what has a tree got to do in an aircraft? Then he explained to me, in technical language, up means a shaft, a transmission shaft, engine transmission shaft, or whatever shaft that transmit the torque from one point to another point. Technical language. There are more and more technical language to learn. So that was a big challenge while we're struggling through ground school, and eventually we passed ground school. The written language in French was not so good. Wherever we couldn't find the French word in our mind, we used English. So our examination script, answer script was bilingual. Some French words filled by intermittent English were in between. Luckily, the chief instructor understood and could speak some English words. All the other instructors could not speak English at all. So we passed the ground school and went on to the next phase of training, which was the first time we touched a helicopter, a rear helicopter. And the rear helicopter is really, really ancient, really old. A Bell 47 used in the Korean War of the 1950s and appeared in the TV series called MASH, M-A-S-H, MASH. Okay, this one. Very hard to fly, basic aircraft. No automation, no stabilization system. So in a matter of 6 months, we learned how to fly helicopters on the basic one. The first solo was an exhilarating flight experience. Without instructor, all alone to yourself, you look after your safety, and you look after the safety of all the other helicopters in the area to make sure that you do not collide with them. And using French as the language of air traffic control. So we did it happily and advanced to the next stage, which was the second stage, advanced stage, on a turbo engine helicopter, the Alouette 2. This is a piston engine, the turbo engine. Then in the turbo engine, another 6 months of training, which means we were there about nearly 10 months already in the flying school. And 1 week before graduation was the final phase of training, and that was mountain flying. That's where I was almost killed. Mountain flying. The school was in the southwestern corner of France, near the border with Spain. Marking the boundary between France and Spain is the Pyrenees mountain range, 10,000 feet high. So the mountain flying phase, we were deployed forward for about 1 week, the whole class with the helicopters deployed forward, and from the base station, we flew the mountains, and the instructor taught us how to land on mountain top. And this was the experience that I went through.
Shattering the silence of the towering mountains, the rhythmic thudding of a helicopter slices through the air. On board, an experienced instructor pilot teaches his student the skills of landing on the rugged terrain of the majestic peaks. The pilot cautiously approaches the tiny landing pad, aiming to touch down before its rocky edge. He misjudges and overshoots the spot. The helicopter tethers precariously at the edge. The pilot fights hard to control the chopper, but it falls off the edge and plummets into the deep
10,000 feet.
The thin line between mastery and
9,000 feet.
disaster blurs as the
8,000 feet,
helicopter
and
falls
we're
into
pointing
the
nose
depths of
down,
its valley.
falling off the top. And fear, real fear crept in. I've never experienced fear to that degree. And I thought that was the end of me. I thought my mother's prophecy was coming true as we fell down. Because when I succeeded in securing the pilot's training post, my mother said, no, son, flying is too dangerous, you may get killed. But my father, who was present, said, no, he's a boy, let him chase his dream, and he must face challenges in life. So my mother reluctantly agreed and said, let me join the Air Force. And that moment, I thought my mother was right. Luckily, the pilot instructor managed to pull out the aircraft after falling about 6,000 feet, level off, and then with his arms, legs shaking, and I was having my head rattling around in fright and fear, he said, that's all for today. Let's get back to base. No more flying today. So we went back to base. But we had not completed the flying exercise yet. I could not graduate. My other colleagues who had completed the exercise that day, the other 12 or 13 classmates, has cleared the last lesson. This was the last lesson. So my instructor analyzed it with me. He said, you must go back and complete the lesson tomorrow. I said, yeah, we go back. Yeah, we go back. Because I can't be left behind. I don't want to be left behind. Usually, in the face of such incidents I learned in life or in the aftermath of an accident, that is the safest period to do the same thing. Because we have analyzed the situation, we have worked out the solution, we have worked out the precautions to take. Similarly, this is what happened. So the next day, he brought me back, we learned how to land, and I landed safely there. We took off from there. And 1 week later, we graduated. 4 Singaporeans. 1, that's me. 2, 3. The 4th one is actually Phillips. He took this picture. So we graduated some 10, 11 months earlier, who could not speak French, who could not read or write French, but managed to graduate equally among our French colleagues, who are seasoned officers. Many of them are already working 5 years, 8 years in the French army in different branches, armor, infantry, and so on, but chosen to divert or switch over to aviation vocation. So we earned the wings. This is a well-earned wing from the French Army Aviation. It's called a pilot and air observer wing, forward air controller wing. And at that time, my wing number, every wing is engraved with a number, serial number at the back. So mine was 827. My colleagues were 828, 829, 830. Which means that up to that time, there were only 830 people qualified to wear this wing, pilot's wing. So we came back and I said, okay, my dream to be a pilot is realized. I have got a pilot's wings now. But I know that was only the beginning. That was only the beginning. So back in Singapore, I felt that, yeah, my dream is fulfilled, but I got to fulfill it fully. We joined, we came back. By that time, the first batch of helicopters were already sent to Singapore and assembled. And I joined this squadron. In those days, the aircraft squadrons, flying squadrons were named after the type of aircraft being operated, not by numbers. Only later were they renamed into numbers. So it's a squadron based in Seletar Air Base. We flew it. I became an operational pilot after about 2 months in the squadron. And we started to take up missions. Training with the army, carrying troops, roping with the armies, abseiling, conducting abseiling with the commandos, carry the commandos for parachute free fall, doing local patrols along the coast, train with the police dog unit, and casualty evasion and search and rescue as well. So we fulfill all those missions with a very simple light and small helicopter. So that was the beginning of my real working life, contributing back to the Air Force. The first thing that appeared was the 1970 flight past, when Singapore showed its air capability to the world at the National Day Parade at the Padang. I was flying the aircraft on the left. There are 3 aircraft in the helicopter formation. I was flying the one on the left here. This was taken off, it's from Singapore Archives. It's taken off from the TV station. In those days, black and white. Black and white, no color yet. So that was one. Then the second thing, we have the first baptism of fire was an overseas deployment to Kuantan, Pahang in 1971 January. If you remember last few days, flooding in Malaysia, the Prime Minister of Malaysia said 6 months worth of rainfall fell in Malaysia in a matter of 4 or 5 days. That was quite a similar situation back in 1970 December, when the whole of Peninsular Malaysia was flooded, East Coast was badly flooded, Kuantan was badly flooded, and roads were closed because of flood waters. And the Malaysian Air Force helicopters were overstretched to help in this type of flood relief operation, sending supplies to stranded villages, evacuating casualties, bringing medical supplies, and so on. So Singapore offered to help. Singapore offered the helicopters for help, which Malaysia agreed and accepted. So in a matter of not even 1 week notice, on the afternoon at 3 o'clock, we received an order to say tomorrow morning, 4 Leo helicopters will depart Seletar Air Base for Kuantan Air Base in Pahang, for flight relief operations. It did not say how long, it did not say what we to do, no details. Go do your map planning, your mission, journey, deployment planning, and get ready to go. So the following day, 8 a.m. or 8:30 a.m., we took off, all the 4 helicopters. Took off in very bad weather conditions. And remember, bear in mind, the Leo helicopter is not designed for instrument flying. In other words, you cannot fly through weather in cloud. The instruments are not good enough, the radio is hardly reliable. You got to fly what is called under VMC, visual meteorological condition, which means you must have at least 1 mile horizontal visibility to be able to identify things very clearly. And you must be able to stay away from clouds, not go into clouds. And you must be able to see what's on the ground, so you can avoid ground and avoid going into the cloud. So 1 mile visibility all around. But when we went out, deployed, it was raining, we only see about half a mile, nautical miles. That's nearly 2 kilometers, straight line. Blur, not so bright, we did not see sunlight at all. We found our way and struggled our way to Kuantan. When we reached Kuantan in the morning, about 11 o'clock, 2 hours, we took about 10 something. We took emptied the aircraft of our stores, our belongings, so on, and shortly after lunch, took on the first mission. All the 5 helicopters took out, started filling with bags of rice, food, supply, and so on, and each one went on its own mission to different parts to supply the stranded villages with food and assistance and so on. So we thought that evening we'd come back. In the afternoon, after last mission, said tomorrow's missions will be blah, 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 blah. You say, I thought we were only here for today. All of us were shocked because we didn't bring our toothbrush, we didn't bring our underwear to change, we got nothing. We were only in our flying suit and our underwear inside and our flying boot. So, okay, like I said, we felt, okay, we don't know how long. We were told we don't know how long. So, day 2 went on. Day 2, we flew the whole day, 3 or 4 missions each. The missions were quite short. Some were 40 minutes long from the airbase out to the stranded area and come back. Some were as long as 1.5 hours. Our endurance for helicopter, operational endurance was 2 hours, which means with 2 hours flight, you only have about 20 minutes reserve fuel to land. So some were 1 hour mission, some 1.5 hour. So the 3rd day, we also flew the whole day. 4th day also flew the whole day. 5th day flew the whole day. We said, this is very smelly, you know. We haven't bathed, there's no water to bathe. There's no proper bed to sleep. We were sleeping on camp beds provided by the Malaysian Air Force. There's no food, fresh food. We were supplied combat ration. And yet we were still flying in very demanding weather conditions, which needs a lot of alertness on our side to fly safely. So we log on, and there's one day, the day was 14 January 1971. I flew 6 missions. At the end, when I stepped off the helicopter, I literally fell to the ground because strapped there for 5-6 hours. In between, we had a half an hour, 1 hour to refuel the aircraft, and then up again. The legs were giving way. I almost collapsed. That was my 21st birthday. On that day itself, no birthday party, no birthday cakes. Stressed out, but I was glad that I could help so many people. And that's how an event like that can be very memorable. Very memorable. So, a few days after that, we had completed a mission. The Americans volunteered to send their UH-1H from Vietnam. Because in 1971, the war in Vietnam was dying off. Operations down. So they have surplus aircraft and crew. They deployed 4 UH-1s from Vietnam down to help the Malaysians with bigger capacity, longer range. So that they started to put us out of business. They could do it. So in the last 2 days we're there, we hardly had any missions, and eventually we were tanked by the Sultan of Pahang with a silver plug to thank the Singapore contingent, and we came home. That was the first baptism of fire. We went out with this whole crew. Secondly, remember the British were leaving in 1971, I mentioned. During that year, 1970 and 71, we were training hard on search and rescue operations, which require close coordination between the pilot, the winch operator, and the winchman. A rescue crew comprises 3 persons: the pilot, the winch operator who operates the winch, and the winchman who goes down in a cable to recover the survivor, the victim. So we were training hard for that, and we did manage to be ready on 1st November 1971, when officially Singapore took over the search and rescue responsibility of the Singapore Flight Information Region, with our helicopters lightweight, short range, covering up to a range of radius of 120 miles from Singapore. Day only, we could not cover night because this aircraft is not equipped well for night flying, just day, good weather flying. And a bigger challenge that we overcame was that we did not have a winch operator and winchman, so-called helicopter crewman vocation set up at that time. So pilots double up as winch operator, operate the winch, like him, this one, David Chua, and double up as winchman when we are on standby duty. We were trained for those additional roles. So multitasking, multi-specialization. And we were on standby from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. every day with a crew or pilot, winchman and winch operator at 15 minutes readiness. 15 minutes means the time we receive an order to go out, we got to be airborne within 15 minutes, 5 minutes. Later, about almost a year later, we had the crewman vocation formalized, and we started recruiting crewmen to be helicopter crewmen. The first batch were medics from Changi Air Base who volunteered for the job. One of the first rescue in the open sea I flew was this one in 1972. The mission was to rescue and evacuate an injured marine engineer who was injured and burned in a ship fire, in a fire 100 miles out in the South China Sea, at the very edge of our combat radius, operating radius. So we flew out there, picked up the casualty from the foredeck of the ship by winching. Here is also a very interesting experience because we had never winched from a burning ship before, and we had no opportunity until that day. That was the first time we went out. We were called out to rescue someone from a ship. So whenever we operated a ship, and I was piloting an aircraft coming in from this direction to the foredeck, I can't come from the back over the fire. I can't come over the front because the bow is too high and the mast there. This cross section I came at a certain angle, but because we had never done this before, I was flying a bit too low, and the winch operator had lowered the winchman a bit too low, and the winchman, as we approached the ship, he was facing the anchor at the bow of the ship here. It was going to smash, and there's no communication. We didn't have communication. He thought he had it. He'd be turning into what called a pancake, hitting the ship. But the winch operator saw it in time. He said, "Oh, up." So I raised the helicopter quickly and pulled him clear from the anchor, clear from that. Went off and then tried another round. After 2, 3, or 4 attempts, we managed to finally put him on the deck and evacuate the casualty and send him direct to General Hospital, Singapore General Hospital. So that was the type of challenge we faced, and we developed a capability. Every Air Force pilot vies for one position, the position of leadership. Leadership for a pilot means a squadron, a flying squadron. I achieved that in 1975, from the time I joined Air Force. So it's about 5 plus 2 years, 7 years after I joined the Air Force, to command 120 Squadron. That same squadron, LOS Squadron. By then it was renumbered using number system now, at that time, to command the squadron. And this was my squadron of pilots, myself, and my engineer, squadron engineer, engineering officer. So that was a small squadron. Squadron has grown up very big now with more aircraft, and the aircraft has changed also to Apache helicopters now, attack helicopter. So that was the dream really fulfilled fully to a very much wide extent. One of the areas we identified is that we could not, and at that time, 1975 was a very rapid build-up of Air Force pilot vocation, not only in the helicopters, which I specialize in, but also in the fighter force and transport aircraft as well, because the Skyhawks had just come into operation and they needed a lot of fighter pilots. We did not want to rely on overseas training schools, training capacity and capability and slots to wait for them. So we developed our own system, and I pioneered the local helicopter pilot course curriculum, master our resources, and conducted the first 3 courses while I was commanding 120 Squadron. So the first one was fortunate. We had 2 instructors, Peter Teo and myself, trained by the UK Central Flying School, and we had 1 student. Then subsequently, we had 3 students, and then later on, another instructor was qualified tank, and then we trained another 3 students. Mostly, we had 3 or 4 students per batch. So here was one area. The second area was unexpectedly, we were called out to rescue the trapped survivors of the cable car. The incident, how many of you have not heard about this incident? You have heard about it, so I won't cover details. But behind it, have you heard the story how the helicopter was chosen as the option? Anyone have known the story behind it? Okay, behind it was, first of all, the helicopters had never trained to rescue people from cable car. Those helicopters in France, the Alps and so on, yes, they have. But we never expect to do this type of job in Singapore, where there are hardly any cable cars. But the helicopters were trained, ready for high-rise rescue from high, tall buildings. When this incident happened, the Air Force was asked, are you able to do it to rescue them? The Air Force said yes, not 100% sure, but high degree, maybe 80-90% capability, because we've not done it before. But we can transfer our skills of winching to this environment, adapt the skill. The Army volunteered, the commandos volunteered. The commandos volunteered to crawl along the ropeway and then lower themselves to the cable car, and then from there secure the survivors and lower the survivor by rope to the ground. So imagine if you are the survivor in there, which do you prefer? Do you prefer helicopter come out and winch you up or someone to put you down? Those who you prefer to be winched up, raise your right hand. You only have 2 options, everybody must answer. Who wants to be winched up? Right hand, okay. Who wants to be lowered down to the ground? Raise your left hand. Oh, left hand, okay. Few of you want to go down. Imagine you're already trapped there. 6 o'clock or so, 6 p.m. was the accident. The rescue took place just after midnight, so about 6 hours, 5-6 hours dangling down there in fear on what's happening. Imagine someone comes down and says, I'm rescuing you, tie this rope, I lower you down. Wow, in the darkness, some more, down in the ground, you can't see what is going on. That's a real fear. Now eventually, the MINDEF committee, led by the then head Joint Operations Department, Lee Hsien Loong, our former Prime Minister, he's now Senior Minister, he weighed the 2 options and he decided Air Force. So Air Force were given the clearance at about 10 p.m. And the Air Force went and did their own rehearsal at Sembawang Air Base, simulating a similar situation in Sembawang Air Base, winching from height over Sembawang Air Base in the darkness. And in a matter of 2 hours or so, they're ready at about 1 a.m. the following morning. That means 7 hours after the accident, the first helicopter went out with the crew. In a matter of 2 hours, which is the endurance of flying endurance of helicopter, they winch out half the survivors. The second helicopter was standing by at the base. The moment the first helicopter left the scene, the second helicopter came in. They were already airborne, came in, took over the rescue of the remainder. So by 5 a.m. in the morning, all 13 survivors were evacuated safely out of the helicopter, out of the cable car cabins, and sent to General Hospital, SGH. So this event attracted world attention during that time, 1983. And if you notice here, why is there someone with Navy uniform? This is Navy Lieutenant Jeff Ledger. He was on loan to us from the Royal Australian Navy to help us further develop our search and rescue capability. He was a naval pilot, helicopter pilot. So he was on loan. During that time when they mastered the people available, we included him as well. We work on the principle of choosing the most suitable person for the job based on the skills and the merit. So that job was done well. Another one unexpected. A lot of unexpected things happened, but we overcame it. Was a New World Hotel collapse. Does anyone not know about it? Anyone not know about the New World Hotel collapse? So I won't say much, except I explain to you why. The basement car park of this New World Hotel, they had a lot of pillars to support the structure. Someone did an unlawful modification that removed one of those pillars, one or two of those pillars. So over time, the structure weakened and the whole building collapsed, trapping many people there. So in that operation, the helicopters supported by deploying helicopters at the nearby Farrer Park football field, which is near the disaster site. The moment the civil defense people evacuated the casualties, sent them by ambulance to here, and the helicopters flew them directly to the general hospital. Having done a lot of local operations, the 1990s was the time Singapore decided to make its appearance in the international stage as well. So the United Nations platform was the first area which Singapore took part in our operation. Cambodia, at the UN supervised election, 4 Super Pumas, repainted into white color, United Nations color, were deployed to Cambodia to help in the election by transporting the ballot boxes from those remote balloting stations to the central counting station. So that helped them in completing the election. And secondly, Timor East, near Indonesia, eastern part of Indonesia. After it gained independence, conducted its own election, there was some trouble down there, instability. So UN peacekeeping force went there, and together we contributed 6 UH-1H helicopters, again painted in UN color, to keep the peace. And in this operation, and the one in Cambodia, our aircraft were armed. We were armed with machine gun, door guns, and so on. And in fact, in this one, we were shot at. Some local resistant people shot at our aircraft. So we, as far as I know, we did not return fire because the shooting was not threatening enough for us to return fire. And the one much closer to home, Aceh, during the tsunami of 2004, 20 years ago. Singapore offered this helicopter as a rapid deployment force. And the first helicopter arrived at Aceh within a matter of 48 hours. That means the next day or the day just after, which basically used our standby helicopters because we have 2 helicopters on 15 minutes alert, round the clock. Those the first one could be deployed. Then we form up the force for the second and third aircraft. So we went there, supported quite a lot of them in the operation. And last, among the resilient stories that I have down here, is this slide down here. This is Sembawang Air Base. Today's boundary with Woodlands, there's a Woodlands New Town. The old Sembawang Air Base was here, up to this point. This whole area, which covered by helicopters, was farmland in those days. So the interesting story here is my legacy. I retired in the year 2000. I joined in 1968. In my early days, I was sent up to Air Force, Air Staff very early because we needed to build up the headquarters capability fast and the planning fast. I was honored to be chosen among the first 4 officers from the then Air Operations Department to form the pioneer planning group called the Air Force Planning Group at the instigation or the initiative of the then Defense Minister, because there was no air planning capability in the Air Force at that time. So he wanted to form an independent air planning group free from the Air Force headquarters to plan for the Air Force's long-term, not near-term, long-term, 30 years, 40 years, 50 years requirement. So I was chosen to be the helicopter specialist. My task was to dream big. That's where my dream started to come in. Dream big, no limit. Recommend what you want to do with the helicopters of the future, 40 years, 50 years from now. So I had 2 plans. I formulated 2 plans. One is the helicopter orbit, helicopter order of battle. We took into consideration what would be the role of helicopters, Singapore helicopters, in the future be, and how to fulfill that role with the type of platform, different categories of platform, and the training and operational capability. That was the first question, first project. The second project is where to base all these helicopters. they must have a home base to operate from. So in these two plans, I formulated the ORBAT plan and also an operational master plan for helicopter at Sembawang. At that time, only this piece of land belonged to the Air Force. So both plans were accepted by MINDEF headquarters. But as usual, plans can come easily, can be approved easily. Money is not easy to come. Budget is not easy to come. So the plans were approved on the shelf, waiting for money to come. So that was in 1979. And after about 1.5 years in the Air Force Planning Group, which I was a founding member, we completed our job and we were transferred to the Air Force headquarters and became the Air Force's Air Plans Department. So we were the pioneers of the Air Force Air Plans Department as well. The actual work on building up the helicopter was easy. You could go and buy and order, just go wait 2 or 3 years for the manufacturer's production line to output aircraft. But to develop a base out like that, to get land is scarce. Land in Singapore is very hard. We had to fight, fight for this piece of land with so many other government agencies. HDB wanted this place, somebody wanted this place. Then there's also building height constraints and so on. Eventually, Air Force managed to get this piece of land. We acquired it and started building. So that was from 1979, 1980, and when I was in my last posting, command posting was in Sembawang Air Base in 1974 until 1994 to 1997, the 3 years, 4 years there, the construction of the new runway had restarted and completed halfway at that time. These parts were all developed at that time. The only western part is the land was cleared. And by the time I retired in the year 2000, the whole area was about 80% developed. And the whole Air Force combat, all the battle was already fulfilled. The platforms will change over time, with technology and so on. But the roads will still be there. So these are the two legacies I leave behind for the Air Force, which I'm proud of and I'm happy to share with everybody, especially younger crews, so that they know the heritage of the Air Force. So from here, from this particular talk, soaring through turbulence, life is up and down like a roller coaster. The key point is, no dream is too big to achieve. When you soar above fear and beyond limits. So my young friends here, dream big, soar above fear. Whatever fear comes along, don't be held down by it. And go beyond limits. Do not let limiting beliefs hold you back. All right? Lessons I drew. There are 3 key areas. One is challenges that come in life. Embrace them. They are the obstacles. When you overcome them, will build up your capability and your confidence. I overcame a lot of them. And this particular picture of the Vietnamese boat people, refugees in South China Sea, which I saw, because during the 1975-76 refugee flooding in South China Sea, I flew helicopter missions out with a news cameraman to take pictures. Such pictures are taken at close range. And I saw the situation that we should not fall into this type of environment. Secondly, no man is an island. Every capable leader, every capable project, every successful project is the outcome of a team, a fully integrated, well-led and inspired team. Build up strong team, network, collaborate for support. And finally, last but not least, resilience. No matter what happens, you may fall. Look to rise. Even the tree out in the desert, what we see is all dry, is still able to survive because it's resilient enough to draw on resources not visible directly to us. In challenging time, we can think of resources that we can find resources we never imagined was there. So here, I urge you to embrace on your unique journey. A journey that will bring you hope and you live on hope to bring you there. Be determined, have strong drive to reach new heights. Your struggles, your challenges are only a stepping stone. And finally, what is important, as you fall, rise again. As you fall, stand up again. Be resilient. And you never know, The power of resilience can bring you to areas and capabilities you never have ever dreamt of when you're consciously thinking about it. The environment could guide you. The opportunities could help you. So in this journey, no dream is too big to achieve. Where you soar above fear and beyond limits. Back here. Singapore lived through 3 years of hell under Japanese occupation. And with the surrender of the Japanese and the return of British and subsequent the road to independence, and Singapore, it is today. Our Singapore security depends on you and me, all of us. In many ways, some contribute in defense, some contribute in economics, some contribute in social, and some contribute in other areas. Remember the 6 pillars of total defense? Who can name 3 pillars? I have one prize for someone who can name 3 pillars. Okay, go ahead.
Social.
Say first. Social, yeah. Sorry? Digital, yes. Social, digital, and? Yeah, you can make it. The another. Good, you got it, yay! Wow, I rest my hope on you, no? The newer generation. Wow, defend our nation, all right? Okay. So, here, these are our heroes coming out to defend us. So here, from what I've spoken, what I've studied, is that clear communication is important, especially so in Air Force. The cornerstone of Air Force success is clear communications and readiness, very important, respond. Secondly, my journey is a testimony of the importance of having a clear goal, pursue the goal, and be persistent at it. And finally, all of us have a big role to play in total defense. I have completed my journey, at least my working journey, where I'm still wanted as an employee. No one wants me as an employee now. I'm on my own. I've completed this journey, turbulent journey of hope, dreams, and resilience. From boy to a young pilot to an Air Base Deputy Commander to where I am now. Have you started on your journey? You have started? I can see you have started. Yeah, good. I put your face there now. Yeah, I can put your face there. More young people, okay, all the young people, I grow you up, okay? Be hero, because 10 years, 20 years time, you'll be speaking up here. Alright? Okay, good. So start on your journey. As you soar through your journey, your turbulent journey, remember, no dream is too big to achieve. When you soar above fear and beyond limits. And I'd like to thank you very much. Thank you very much.